Welcome everybody to Uncorked with Carla. So thankful that you joined us. I will give a quick introduction to Carla and then we will begin. So Carla was born and raised in Swift Current and received her Bachelor of Social Work from the U of C. With a passion for working in the community, she began practicing social work for a number of years. Her time working with those in need led her to practice law, where she was called to the Saskatchewan Bar in 2002. Carla is a partner with her father in Nimegeers Carlson law firm. Did I say that right?
You did.
Excellent. My neighbor's Nimegeers.
Wow.
So from an early age, Carla was taught the importance of community engagement and involvement, and she is also active in Pro Bono Law Saskatchewan, promoting access to justice for residents in Saskatchewan with limited access. She also serves on many boards, and her work in palliative care led her to receive the 2012 Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. Amazing. So most recently, let's give her a hand. Most recently, Carla has had her first book published. It is called Everyday Grace, Finding Your Extraordinary in the Ordinary Everyday Life. And this is utilizing the stories of people she encountered through her practice. Carla inspires the reader to consider the many different ways we respond to life's challenges. And along with her book, Carla is speaking to a variety of audiences, sharing her inspirational message across the country. Carla is married to Chad, and they have two daughters, Emma and Sophie, who are 14 and 12. So please welcome Carla Carlson.
Thank you, Lisa.
So, first question I love to ask people is, how did you get where you came from? But number one, what made you decide to become a lawyer after practicing as a social worker?
Great question. So, my early beginnings started with service, right? My mom was a huge component of service, whether that was service within our church or our school or our community or whatever that looked like, and that was how I was raised. So always the give back and looking for the give back, which naturally led me into a social work profession. So I went back to school, or I went to school, got my degree in Calgary, and obtained my social work, my Bachelor of Social Work. Ended up doing child welfare, so working with children at risk. My first job as a social worker was what was called an in-home care worker. And so what that was is I actually lived with families that had children at high risk for abuse. So instead of removing the children from the home, they actually put us into the home to help the family provide education and provide support and teach parenting skills. I was 20. I'm not sure how many parenting skills I had, but I tried to pull out everything I had. I learned some of probably the most powerful lessons of my life from that position. One of the families I worked with, in fact, the first family I worked with, I got the call saying I was going to be placed into the home, and they started to tell me about what we would be dealing with, and they said, okay, mom's got lots of challenges. She's got learning disabilities, we're struggling with addictions, she's overwhelmed, she's stressed. There was actually an altercation at the house last night, that's why you're going in. Mom actually stabbed dad in front of the children, and so the children have been traumatized. So I need you to settle everybody down, Carla. That's your first role, and I need you to clean things up. The children all have difficulties as well. There was 3 children in the home, and so they talked about the difficulties that the children had in terms of learning disabilities, ADHD, FAS, you name it. The gamut was there with these 3 young children. And so they placed me into that home. Before the social worker sent me on my way, she said, and of course this is all before, I might be dating myself, Lisa, but all before cell phones. So they said, take a quarter. There's a gas station across the street. You're gonna need that, because if there's any issues, you just need to run over there and call for help. So that was the advice I had going in as a social worker, as a young girl going to help from my service background, right? Knocked on the door. Mom opened the door reluctantly, wasn't happy at all to see me, let me in. She walked across the room and sat in the corner watching TV, and I crossed into the room, and as soon as I walked into the room, I knew what I was facing. I could see immediately what had happened the night before. I could see a family that was impoverished, a family struggling with all kinds of issues that were all very present in front of me, and I can imagine you can see that picture in your mind right now. And so at that point in my life, as my very first social work job, I thought to myself, what do I do? right? Like, what am I gonna say to these people? How am I gonna help this family? How am I gonna help these kids? I was completely overwhelmed. All the things that I'd learned at social work school were running quickly through my head. You know, I had all kinds of fancy theoretical social work skills, but I don't know if I knew what to do in that moment, right? And as I looked down, of course, the kids are all playing around me, and I'm watching this, and the baby is crawling across the floor. And what I see is there's a grate in the floor right in front, in between the two rooms, where the heat comes out of the floor. So if that baby walked on that grate, they would be burned, right? There would be an injury. And then I thought about my mom. What would my mom do, right? She's the best social worker I know, and she was an accountant. And that's when I realized that sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes you just have to be, right? So I just sat on the floor and I watched those kids. And eventually those kids came to me. And eventually we started to play together. And Mom's chair slowly started to turn. And eventually, Mom spoke to me. And we started a relationship. That moment changed my life. That moment was the start of everything for me, because I realized that I had it in me to just be and allow my energy to support people. And so that's where it all began as a social worker. And I worked with many families after that. And I learned so much from those families and from those kids. I had so many moments, right? But eventually it wasn't enough for me. Eventually I just felt like I needed to do more on a bigger, grander scale. And as a social worker, I just felt like I didn't have the power to make the impact that I wanted to make. And at the time, the political environment wasn't great for social work in Alberta. And so there was a lot of pressure on dealing with children at risk. And there was a lot of ethical things that I felt that I couldn't deal with anymore. And so at that point, I chose to go back to law school. So I was encouraged by my family to do that once they knew that I was going. So neat story, my dad is a lawyer, has been a lawyer all my life. He's turning 78 tomorrow, and he's been practicing, it'll be now 53 years, and he's still full-time in the practice, and he's my partner. When I decided to go back to law school, I didn't tell him. I didn't want any opinions from my family for lots of reasons. So I wrote the LSAT, and then I was accepted to the U of S. And once I was accepted, then I decided I would tell my family the good news. And so I announced it to my parents and to my brothers and to my family. I actually had a family wedding. And my dad at the time was absolutely horrified, which was a shock to me. I thought he would be delighted, right? I thought he would be so excited. But at that time, he was incredibly worried because he knew that I had passion to have children, that I wanted to have a family, that I had all kinds of ideas about what that was going to look like, and he worried very much about how I would be able to get all that done. Well, I did. And he's very proud. So that's kind of what led me into the law practice.
Great. Now you mentioned you work with your dad, and I'm sure there's many people here that may work with family or you've partnered or whatever. What's it like working with your dad?
It's the most fabulous thing ever, because you can't have a better champion, right? He absolutely wants to see me succeed. So he teaches me everything he knows, and I'm a sponge with him, because I know that someday I won't be able to ask those questions. I've learned that lesson, right? And so every day is a teaching moment. He's always there to support me. We work very well together. We have passionate arguments. We both fight fearlessly for the clients. And so it's worked very well. There's obviously challenges to that. You know, I have a different vision maybe in where the firm needs to go. He's at a different stage in his practice than I am. But he's kind of handed over those reins to me. And he's been really very accepting and allowing new things to happen, and technology and all that kind of stuff that he doesn't love. So it's been a fabulous experience and a very supportive environment, which is great as a lawyer.
So I know that you had mentioned your mom was your accountant, and which I'm thinking may have been a huge relief for you, just because that's money. That's a big part of growing a business. Just can you talk about the relationship of having a family like your mom as your accountant?
Mm-hmm. So I never get my taxes done on time. My mom actually passed away in 2008, but that's a story in and of itself. Having my mom as my accountant was a relief, right? Because you have so many questions and you don't want to look stupid and you don't want to look like you don't know. And especially when you're just getting started, she was there to answer all of them and to help me get things on the right track and to understand how everything worked and to support the business as we move forward. My mom also dearly loved my husband. And in fact, I think sometimes my mom liked my husband better than she liked me. And so she actually convinced him to work with him, or work with her, pardon me. And so my husband ended up joining my mom's practice. And eventually when my mom passed away, my husband took it over. So our firm is actually an accounting and law firm, very much a family practice. At one time it was my mom and my husband on the accounting side. Now my mom's gone and it's just my husband and my dad and myself on the law side. So.
Okay. Just on that, my mom always said she will take my husband in the divorce.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm sure my mom would have said the same.
So any advice to keeping business in the family? Do you have a set of rules? Is there sort of this line we don't cross? There's anything that you can, any rules that you've made up between you and your family?
I think, you know, for me, it's always been starting every conversation from a position of respect and honor. I think that's a big part of it, is respecting what everybody brings to the game, what everybody brings to the conversation, because even though I'm young and new and have new ideas, my dad's got tradition and depth behind him. And so every conversation is very open. We have no secrets. There's nothing I wouldn't tell him. We align together always. But really, it's starting every conversation from a place of respect and honor that changes the whole dynamic. We can work through anything then. Yeah.
Great. So we'll move on to, you are the author of Everyday Grace. Yes, finding your extraordinary and ordinary everyday life. So can you tell us, this book was made from the stories over your life, really, but how did you get here?
Sure. So how I got here is actually a really cool story. So I was at a Women Entrepreneurs Conference here in Regina. We were in Saskatoon. And I know that because we were shopping at Tracks. Yes. And I was at this conference and we left to go get lunch and of course make a pit stop at Tracks. And when we came back, we were late. And when we were late, of course, at a conference, the only open table is the one right at the front. And of course, the keynote speaker is up and he's doing his thing. And he was an extremely dynamic speaker who was like moving around and calling people out and inviting people to participate and all that kind of good stuff. So we came and we sat down, and right away, of course, he noticed us. And it was myself and two of my very good friends. And he took note that we were there. And so then he started to engage with us. And during part of his presentation, it was a presentation about women in business and all those kinds of good things. He had a competition, and whoever won the competition got a free hour of coaching with him. He owns a coaching business. He has thousands of coaches all over North America. So I was extremely competitive. Anyways, long story short, I ended up winning the competition and getting the free hour of coaching. So we were sitting there chatting, and all of a sudden the next speaker comes up, and he's sitting at the table next to us, so I invited him to join us. And so he did, and the next speaker comes up and she's talking about dress for success, which is very important, and I think it's great, but of course I don't think that he was particularly interested in the topic, right? And so I thought, here it is, here's my chance. So I leaned over and I said, "Do you drink scotch?" And he looks at me and he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Great, I won a free hour, I'll buy you a scotch, let's go." And he said, "What? Like right now?" And I said, "Yeah, like there's a restaurant in the front of or a bar in the front of the place. Let's go. I want my free hour right now," because I wanted it in person. I didn't want to do it over the phone, right? I really wanted to engage with this guy and get some great advice. He now tells me that nobody's ever asked him that before. Anyways, long story short, we went for a scotch, myself, my two friends, and this fellow. And he coached me for that hour. And we talked about business, and we talked about my plans, and all kinds of things happened in that hour that were incredibly magical in my life. And that was the end of it. I didn't think I'd hear anything. I gave him my business card. He went home, I went home. 2 weeks later, he phoned me and he said, Carla, I want to coach you. And I said, really? Like, really? And he's like, yeah. So this guy is a best-selling author in New York. He does speaking all over the world. His name is Christopher Flett. He's an amazing resource. And he, out of the thousands of people that they coach, he coaches 11 people in North America. And he wanted me to be one of those people. So I was obviously very honored. So I took it on. So I worked with him for a couple of years, coaching regularly, and he's been spectacular. And through that coaching process, of course, I've shared a lot of my stories. And as he was hearing my stories one day, he said, Carla, I'd really like you to write a chapter for me of a book. So you see, Christopher also owns a New York publishing company. And I said, well, that's a great idea, but like, I don't know how to write a book, and what am I going to write about, and all these insecurities start coming out, right? And he's like, I don't care about any of that, just write me a chapter. I don't know if any of you have coaches, but he's pretty demanding, right? So I said, all right. So I write the chapter and I ship it off to him by email. We do everything over the phone. He's in wherever he is in the world when we chat, right? And he read the chapter, and about a week later, he wrote me back and he said, write me another one. And I said, of course, needy Carla, right? Was it good enough? Was it long enough? What did you like? What would you like me to write about? Blah, 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 in my email back. And he says, no, just stop with all your questions and write me another one. So I did. So I wrote him another chapter and I sent it off. And 2 hours later, after sending it to him, in my email inbox was a publishing contract. So the second chapter that I wrote for him is the first chapter of my book. So that was a very cool moment for me. So how did my book come about? Scotch.
So in your book, and when I was talking to Carla on Saturday, she said, well, have you read my book? I'm like, well, I haven't got the book yet. She goes, that's too bad.
I'll bring you one.
And she talked about just capturing stories of success, loss, and courage. And you talked about feeling uniquely alone. And I think we're all entrepreneurs. We do feel uniquely alone. And I think we can all agree to that. You want to talk a little bit about your book and some of the stories, just the overview?
Absolutely. So interesting you say that, because the first thing you said to me, Lisa, when she called, we were having a chat last week, and it was very early in the morning when I phoned her. So she said, I don't even know if you have a story, so what's your story, right? You know, which was great, because you know what? That's exactly the point, right? That's exactly the point of my book. So I'm so glad you said that, because I truly, truly believe in my heart that we all have a story. Of course we all have a story, but how we share that story is completely different, right? And as a young girl, I thought that you had to be like Lady Gaga or, you know, Margaret Trudeau or whoever, right? You aspired to be like, or whatever your vision was, to make things happen, right? But what I've realized from my beginnings as a social worker, as I sat on that floor in that house, is absolutely that's not true, right? Absolutely that's not true. And so in my practice of law, as well as my practice of social work, I encounter so many people, all kinds of walks of life. Some of my clients fly me places to do things. Some of my clients can't pay my bill, right? I see it all. And everybody has challenges. Everybody thinks their challenges are unique. Everybody feels that when they're going through those challenges that they're alone. But what we all know is that when we go through those challenges, they're not unique. Everybody experiences loss. Everybody experiences separation. Everybody needs courage. Everyone has moments of huge success in their life and don't maybe know how to deal with that, right? And so the book is a compilation of stories I've gathered of those experiences from people of all walks of life to share with you, to show you, to help you see yourself in those stories. And that's the goal of the book.
You know, it's funny, as you're talking, I thought, I sometimes think people are looking up here and you think we all have it together. And I think we present that way, and you know, we put on the nice suit, thanks to Tanya, but you know, we all have feelings of inadequacy, so I want you to all know that I got it all the time. And I'm gonna think, when you walked into your first job, you felt inadequate and you just said, just sit down and...
Just sit on the floor, right? Sit on the floor. And I tell myself that all the time. You know, as a lawyer, I walk into a lot of rooms where I'm not liked, where people are angry, hostile, they're experiencing great stress, you know, and it has nothing to do with me. But I just have to sit on their floor, right? I just have to become part of the moment of what's happening and understand where they're coming from and try and problem solve through it with them. I see myself as a lawyer as somebody who walks the journey beside them. And certainly providing leadership is important, but usually the solutions always come from the client. I'm just there to guide the law, right? And so that's a big part of what I do. Through the book, it gives me another vehicle, another avenue to get that done. And I do speaking, and the book has been presented in all kinds of different forums. I'm always amazed at how well it's received. One of the things that really surprised me is that men really love the book, and I don't know why that surprised me so much. I didn't expect that. I thought it would be a book more for women, but men have really responded positively to the book. In fact, I had one gentleman write me a letter and just said, "This book has changed my life." And he was a construction guy, hardcore, you know, I never expected it. I don't know why. But anyways, really challenged my thinking on the book and opened me up to, you know, we are all just the same, and we are all spectacular. We just have to discover our everyday grace and how we're going to use that moment, right?
Right. So, social worker, lawyer, author, speaker, what's your end game? Do you have your mission in life? Where are you headed? Can you tell us?
You know, have you read The Alchemist? Okay, so The Alchemist is a book written about 25 years ago by a fellow, his first name is Paulo, and because he shares his soul in that book, I call him Paulo. I don't feel like I need to know his last name because we're well connected through the book. Anyways, if you haven't read that book, you need to. It is absolutely spectacular, absolutely spectacular. Anyways, the reason why I tell you that is because he says in the book, one of the quotes that he makes, and I hope I get this right, is he says, basically I'm paraphrasing, but when you're chasing your dream, the entire universe conspires to help you when you're chasing your dream. And I totally believe that. So you say, where is your end game? There is no end game, right? The game for me is hanging out with all of you and gathering what I can and learning and growing and experiencing. And every step that I've taken along the way has led me down a little bit different path. And it's always very exciting and challenging. And I have no idea where this is going. And sometimes that makes me crazy because I can't predict it. And I'm very much a lawyer in one part of my brain that needs to have certainty. But this has just been super fun. And I've been engaged with so many different people as a result of it. And who knows what that means? Does it mean another book? Well, I have a contract for one, but I'm not sure that I'm going to write it. We'll see. You know, does it mean speaking across Canada? Well, that's in the works too. Who knows how long that will go? I also have 2 young daughters that are doing fabulous things of their own. So I have no idea, but that's part of the fun of it. So I'm just letting things open up and we'll see where it goes.
I liked how you mentioned just always surrounding yourself. You got to surround yourself with people who care and can build you up. Don't surround yourself with people that just keep putting you down. Surround yourself with people that love you and, you know.
Champions. I call them champions. And I think one of the things that women need to do better, that men do really well, is leveraging, right? Men know how to leverage not just money and assets, but they know how to leverage relationships. They know how to introduce other people. They know how to use those relationships to move themselves forward, but also help others. And they don't see it as a reflection of failure or success. They see it as leverage. And I think as women, we do that. We need to get better at that. We need to prop each other up. We need to use our relationships. We need to introduce people to people you think can make a difference. And we need to be connected. Because that's what it's really about, is the connection.
For some people, making that connection is a big risk, but what is the biggest risk you've ever taken? If it's money, or if it's people, or if it's...
Oh, I've
Anything.
taken so many risks. Like I remember the day when I came home and told my husband that I was walking away from a full-time, really good, secure job to go back to law school, and that we were going to be poor. And that I was going to live 3, 4, 5 hours away from him for 3 years, and we're going to see if we can make that work. You know, that was probably one of the hugest risks I took, but one of the most rewarding, and I'm delighted that I did it. I continue always to take risks and just to throw my name in the ring and put myself out there and just see what happens. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen, right?
Great. And can you tell us one thing about yourself that no one else knows?
You know what? I don't think I can, because I'm like absolutely transparent. And my friend Annika is here today, and she would tell you that I'm an open book. And I mean, if you read my book, one of my friends read my book and she said, I kind of felt like I was peeking in your window, Carla, when I read the book, because you told so much about your life and your person, right? So I don't have a good answer for that for you, Lisa.
Well, how about any leadership books? Let's talk about some of your favorite reads.
I'm so glad you asked. I actually brought them. Kind of a book nerd. So, of course, the first book I would recommend is something called Everyday Grace. It's a great read, yeah. But I love a bunch of eclectic different books. So this book is called How to Have a Good Day, and it's written by Carolyn Webb. It is a fascinating read because what she does is she takes behavioral economy, psychology, and neuroscience. I have this written at the back so that I don't forget the 3 things. But basically, she combines those 3 sciences together and talks about how to make your day better. And it sounds really technical and scientific, but it's actually really hands-on, and it teaches you specifically how to have conversations and change your language and the neuroscience behind what's happening in your brain when different things happen in your life. And so, highly recommend this book. I have 4. Servant Leadership in Action, Ken Blanchard. If you haven't read this, get this on your stack beside your bed. It is phenomenal. This guy's a genius. It will just make you feel better about yourself. He does actually courses on LinkedIn that you can take that will just, you know, really, it's so inspiring, and he's so amazing. And servant leadership is absolutely the position I come from in my practice and in my life. So something to look into if that's not something you're into yet. Open by Andre Agassi. Never played tennis, don't have the cardio for it. Fascinating book, amazing. This guy hated tennis, hated it. And he was like world champion how many times? This book is stunning. It's about how you stick with it. And it's the end of the story is brilliant in terms of what he did with his life, and the kind of charity and service work he does is unbelievable. Very inspiring book. Highly recommended. And finally, of course, The Alchemist by my buddy Paulo. Yeah, this is a life-changing book and needs to be on your list if you don't have it yet. Absolutely amazing read.
What I find absolutely funny is, has anybody at least read 2 of those books? 2 people. Well, you don't count, you're her best friend. I think that's amazing because those are not on my book list, so I'm going to have to write those down or take pictures of them.
Awesome.
So we have hit the half hour. I want to thank you so much for coming. It has been a great time, and I think really just learning about family business, but also just the journey it took to get where you are, and you're not done. So if we could just give Carla a warm welcome. Thank you.